Hello, my name is Euan Crumley and welcome to a special bonus episode of the Athletics Weekly podcast featuring a very special guest, the former Olympic 400 metre champion Cathy Freeman. It's now 25 years since the Sydney Olympics of 2000 and one of the greatest nights of athletics the world has ever seen. Whilst London 2012 had Super Saturday, September the 25th, 2000 quickly became known as Magic Monday when athletes such as Michael Johnson, Haile Gebrselassie and Jonathan Edwards memorably struck gold. However, there's one performance from that night which still stands out above all, even after all these years. And there was one woman in particular that the capacity crowd of 112,000 people in Stadium Australia had come to see. Cathy Freeman's athletic talent had been clear from an early stage, and she was just 16 when she became the first Indigenous Australian to win Commonwealth gold in the 4x100 metres relay in 1990. Her big individual breakthrough came when she won Commonwealth 200 metre and 400 metre gold in 1994. But 1 year previously, it had been announced that Sydney would host the 2000 Olympics. She would become the face of those games, and the path was set for a victory that would ultimately be about so much more than sport. After every one of her major victories, Freeman flew the Aboriginal flag. At first, it was seen as a controversial move. Australia's chef de mission in 1994 even tried to stop her from doing it, but by the time she stood with the Olympic flame in her hand, about to light the cauldron at the opening ceremony, she had become the public symbol of reconciliation in her country. The process of improving relations between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and non-Indigenous Australians had long been on the agenda, but it had never been more prominent than in 2000. May of that year had seen the Walk for Reconciliation across Sydney Harbour Bridge, the largest political demonstration in Australia's history at the time. Before she had even run a step, Freeman's very presence at that opening ceremony was hugely symbolic. She might have prepared for the Games in England under coach Peter Fortune and alongside fellow Olympic finalist Donna Fraser, but in the host city, her image, her presence, was everywhere. It's often forgotten that Freeman also competed in the 200 metres in Sydney, coming sixth, but it was over 400 metres where the then reigning two-time world champion was a clear favourite for gold. Sydney was Freeman's third Olympics. 4 years previously, in Atlanta, she had been beaten to silver by Marie-Josée Pérec, and the French two-time champion was not only seen as the biggest threat, but the foe that the Australian favourite was desperate to face once again. But the rematch was not to be. Claiming to have been threatened and harassed by the Australian media and public, whom she felt were trying to sabotage her chances, Pérec withdrew less than 48 hours before the opening qualifying heat, fleeing the country. That only heightened the expectation levels on the home favourite, but dressed in a distinctive, hooded, full-body speed suit, Freeman rose to the occasion, keeping her head while all around her in the stands, others were losing theirs. As a blizzard of camera flashbulbs followed her every step, she came off the final bend shoulder to shoulder with Jamaica's Lorraine Graham and Britain's Catherine Merry. However, halfway down the home straight, she surged away to hit the line first in 49.11 seconds. When Freeman celebrated with the Australian and Aboriginal flags on her lap of honour, no one was about to try and stop her this time. I spoke with her to relive those games and find out what it was like to be at the centre of a moment that still means so much to so many, quarter of a century later.
Can you believe it's 25 years since Sydney and all of that?
That's a big capital N-O double underline exclamation mark. Life is so different now. So I look back at footage. Mm-hmm. I look back at footage and I just think, just like that, the 25 years has just occurred.
Yeah. What's the first thing you sort of think of when you start thinking back to that time? What's the first thing that sort of comes to mind?
I think it was the glare, as in like the theatre of it all, the spectacle and the enormity of it all in terms of its viewership, what it meant to people and, how people in their lives still connect with those games 25 years ago, just how strong the memory, well, to Australians here anyway. So the strength of that connection to those games is it's just unflappable. People are just still so attached and so connected to that time 25 years ago.
What do you think it was that sort of struck that such a chord with everyone? I know there was so much going on at the time as well.
Were you there at all? Were you
I
there?
sadly wasn't. No, my colleague was, but no, I wasn't. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, it's one of these. Geez, the only words that come to mind was it was just such a magical moment shared by the collective, by the amazing collective, and I don't know if folks felt it through the cameras or or through their radio, through their sound systems. But certainly those who were in the stadium that night, it was just this electrifying, profoundly magical, just uniting, amazing spectacle. Anyone who was in the stadium that night is still, will often share with me how they still get shivers whenever we reflect. And I mean, obviously from my point of view, it was a vastly different experience. But yeah, no, it's one of these moments in time where there really was true unity that was playing out. And and it was beautiful, just so beautiful to be a part of and to see it in front of my very own eyes.
Yeah. Does it still give you shivers to think back about it?
I think it you know what, it absolutely takes my breath away. Like it absolutely makes me think about that time in the world, the time in the world before, other world events occurred. And it was truly one of the greatest life events for me personally, personally and publicly. But certainly, even 3 years previous, there were moments where, we were all as athletes looking towards the Sydney Olympic Games. For some athletes, it may have been a longer period of time because we knew 7 years out that Sydney had the Games. And so certainly for me, it became quite a presence in my life probably 3 years after I won my first world title in Athens.
Yeah, and obviously I think you've spoken before about Atlanta and the sort of the disappointment you had from that. How much did that sort of fuel you, and then how important was that first world title?
Yeah, the first world title was really important because I had some personal issues off the track that nearly caused me to take the season off. And then I somehow, with the support of my core team, pulled my socks up and kept on running. And I won my first world title, and it absolutely created this momentum and the trajectory towards Sydney Olympic Games. So the 1997 year was really, really important, given that I was just not in the right frame of mind at the end of the 1996 season. The silver medal was something that I absolutely knew I could win, and I didn't think beyond a silver medal. I gave Marie-Jo Perry so much respect, and I felt that she was probably going to win the gold medal, and I certainly didn't see myself as a serious contender. And maybe I was too scared to go up against her, and even too scared to even believe that I could do anything more than win a silver medal. You look back at the order of events and it's all natural progression, and in hindsight, everything is all changeable. You sort of reflect and you sort of wonder about whether you could have or should have. At the end of the day, I only wanted one Olympic gold medal, which I got out of Sydney.
Yeah. And how conscious a decision was it for you to embrace everything about Sydney, about the attention you were going to receive, about that sort of spotlight?
Yeah. I certainly had a very respectful appreciation for, for what was unfolding and what was playing out. I certainly wasn't interested in completely ostracizing myself from it all, because I wanted to soak it up somewhat.
Yeah.
But especially after I got business done, like I was very business-like, I was very matter of fact about moving through the training and the preparation and the lead up, and very business-like. And in fact, when I did cross the line, in that 400-meter final, I remember the thoughts in my mind were, "Oh, so this is what it feels like to be an Olympic champion." It was all very, so this is what it feels like. But certainly it wasn't, for me, the enormity of it could have so easily overwhelmed me, I think, and the sentimental aspect of it, to Australians, particularly to the First Nations community of Australia. And, so I was just moving through really, with a very simple approach to everything. And that was just to do what we'd always done, and treated each day as as no different to the day before, to be really honest.
Yeah.
In terms of attitude, mindset, approach, philosophies, because we knew that the occasion would somehow pull out of me as a competitor what I needed to release, I guess, in terms of the competitive nature, my competitiveness.
Yeah, I was watching back the footage of the opening ceremony, and there were so many potential traps for you. Whether that was the endless staircase, the surrounding yourself in fire, all of those things. What was that like to be a part of?
Well, I can talk quite freely about it all now. It's interesting, Euan, because I get I feel a little bit unwell thinking about those moments, because it was quite intense. There's a lot of ceremony. There's a lot of, like I said, the numbers when you look at the viewership, and, folks all around the world and in Australia. And it was just, the numbers are just mind-boggling. And it's only now, 25 years on, I sit and I ponder those numbers, and I just think, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And I think because I was so focused, I kind of did compartmentalize, lighting the opening ceremony. I kept it separate, to the focus, to that part of my life, on my mind, where it was just, I was there to race and I was there to compete to the best of my ability. So it was absolutely an amazing honour, but nobody can really prepare you, for that kind of amazing responsibility. Yeah, it's interesting. Folks often say, did it make you feel like you're under any more pressure? Or as if I wasn't under enough expectation already. Mm-hmm. But I think I just had this silent, and competitors have this silent but deadly self-belief that kind of I held sacred. And so, and I knew I knew how to protect my, that inner sanctity. I think it also helped that, my two training partners knew when I found out that I was lighting the cauldron, they were very much across what lay ahead of me. And I think that helped me cope as well. But in rehearsal, the day of the opening ceremony, everything was perfect. But when it came to the actual night of the opening ceremony, it's now public knowledge that it broke down. The cauldron it malfunctioned for 4 minutes. I thought it was far less than that, but gee whiz. The fact that it broke down was just, it's still hard to wrap my head around that it even occurred, that it could have so easily become a bit of a true disaster.
And what was it like? noticeable. It still comes through the video of the noise that the crowd makes when you first take the torch. Do you remember that moment and how much of an effect? Was that the sort of the point that you went, wow, this is going to be big?
Oh, I knew in my mind, I had a sense, I had a sense for, for how people were going to react. Not entirely, but I allowed myself to think about it at times. But for me, I knew that once I got on the track and started racing, that would be where I'm in my element, at my most natural. But certainly the reaction when Debbie Flanoff-King gave me the flame, certainly was really quite beautiful, because the reaction I felt was lovely. Haven't really thought about it, so thank you for asking. It's a moment in time, I guess, where I was feeling very, very honoured indeed.
Yeah. How important was it then to, as you say, start running to get into the business of what you were there to do? How much of a release and a relief was it to?
Oh, it's interesting. Running has always been a release for me and a relief at the same time. And it's only now, I'm 52 and I can absolutely embrace the whole concept of it all being so meditative for me. And I felt so free when I ran and so happy and so full of joy. And I felt free, that nothing, even still to this day, can quite compare to that feeling I used to experience every time I raced, especially raced.
Yeah.
So, I always, in meditation circles and in mindfulness circles, I talk about, this kind of non-doing, the whole idea of non-doing, where, it's almost in line with, being in flow or being in the zone.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still trying to understand it. It's such a beautiful feeling. It was such a beautiful feeling for me. I've almost felt like my soul took flight or something.
Okay.
There's this beautiful joy I felt when I ran. So despite the intense pressures of it being an Olympic final, that's where I belonged, out on the track competing.
Yeah. Were you able to put yourself into a bubble, from everything else outside? Because obviously there was everything that was going on with Marie Jose as well, and how she had to to leave and things like that. Were you aware of that going on at the time, or?
Absolutely. I remember being in the warm-up track. We're doing a training workout. I think it was after the games started. I believe it was after the games had started. And my heart dropped, actually, when I heard the news. I was so kind of quietly devastated, because I knew that I needed her. I needed to race against her to feel this sort of sense of satisfaction at even having a shot at winning against her in my own home country. But at the same time, I respected her decision, and I remember thinking to myself, geez, she really must be so confident in the decision that she's made, and I respected that decision. So selfishly, I felt it was a bit of a sort of a heart-dropping moment. But on the other hand, I had to accept it, and I respected her wishes.
Yeah, yeah. So. And when it got down to the getting into the heats and the semi-finals, how were you feeling as you went through those? You were feeling good in form. Was it going just as you'd hoped? Yeah,
I was very clear on what I needed to do, and I held on to my coach's every word, because it can often just make you feel safe, knowing what the instructions were and what steps I needed to take. I remember the first round and the second round are all often just a case of, without being too complacent or overconfident, but feeling strong and relaxed. In my experience, having been to 2 previous Olympics, the semi-final is where the intensity has to greaten, and you almost have to treat it like a final, actually. Because, surprises happen all the time. Athletes are going to come out and create magical performances out of the blue all the time.
Yeah.
And, we've seen in sport, all kinds of dramas can unfold. So you have to be quite assertive and be very commanding in your presence as a contender for the Olympic gold medalist. And so I made sure I did that. I made sure that the other girls were going to have to compete against me, and because in a sense, I think we all knew that I had every advantage under the sun. I had the advantage of a home crowd, which was, I remember the girls, even with 110, 120 metres to go, nobody kind of forged their assertiveness in terms of, I can win this. Nobody really pushed it. Nobody... Yeah. And so you can see, if you ever see the race, that I don't really make a move until we're well into the home straight. Because, psychically, or, you just can sense energetically, nobody believes that they can win this thing.
Yeah.
Whereas the difference, if Marie-Jo Perec had been in the race, Euan, in top form, it would have been, the tactics of the race would have been completely different. Yeah. It would have been far more intense from the moment the gun went.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask you about was the Swift suit.
Yes.
And whether that was something you enjoyed. Did you like running in it? It just felt, looking at it, it looks claustrophobic, and I just wondered if that, how much of a difference that made.
Yeah. These questions you're asking me now, I had those very same questions before I, when I was presented with the whole idea, with the concept. Ed Herbert, he was a driving force behind the research and design of it. Yeah, we sat down and got into it and discussed it, and I trialled it in training and in a race in Northern England, in Newcastle, I think it was, in a 200. And I think once I got used to the new pre-race ritual, because athletes, we tend to have certain ways of preparing to leave our hotel rooms to go to the track to compete.
Yeah.
I think once I became used to the new routine, because wearing a leotard 2-piece or a 1-piece leotard is very different to, wearing this, 1-piece all body outfit. As soon as the gun went, I forgot I was even wearing it, to be honest.
Okay.
As soon as the gun went, I forgot I was wearing it. However, I remember actually feeling like I was slicing through the air.
Okay.
I was slicing through the air, and it felt beautiful. It felt really good. And I would not have worn it if I didn't feel good in it.
Yeah, it's a big risk to take otherwise.
I was hesitant because I thought, gee whiz, I'm already going to be given enough, attention. I don't need to add to the drama. But to be really truthful, it made me feel really good. I really did feel like I was slicing through the air.
And when it comes to the race itself, you've just spoken about it there. Do you remember much about the race itself, or did it just sort of pass by in the sort of the blink of an eye?
Yeah, I think that the part that we got to about 110 metres to go, and that's where in a 400 metre matters become really interesting, and all kinds of this, the real story can start to unfold, and the real competition can become evident, and who's going to compete, who's going to make a presence and who isn't, or, who has that self-belief and who's content with where they are at that particular part of the race. That's 400 metre running for you. You can see it all over athletes' bodies, the way in which they compete. But I remember the two big moments for me were waiting for someone to make a move as we came around the second bend to hit the home straight. And then with about 70, 80 metres to go, I literally felt like my feet weren't touching the ground and I was being carried. It just sounds so odd, doesn't it? But the crowd, everybody, it just seemed like everybody was gunning for me to win this thing.
Yeah.
It really did. And it was just so surreal. To not feel your feet touch the ground like that is just one of the most, is it bizarre? Yeah, I'd say it was a bizarre set of circumstances for sure.
Yeah, is that perhaps one of the reasons why you took your shoes off so quickly after you finished, was just to get back in touch with the ground?
Absolutely. I spent a lot of my childhood barefoot, and I consider myself a dirt and wood girl. Like I grew up in nature settings, so
yeah,
in the outback of Queensland and bush regions of Australia. So I think I needed to just feel the ground under my feet, just to feel like exactly that, grounded. Yeah, because there was absolute, I wouldn't call it pandemonium, but there was absolutely some major commotion going on around happening, around me.
You said there when you crossed the line, you had that feeling, oh, this is what it feels like to be the Olympic champion. What did that feel like, or does that feeling come a little bit later on?
I remember I was mid-air, and I was so this is what it feels like to be an Olympic champion. I remember looking at the time and being disappointed with the time, and I was really, really hoping to get under 49 seconds, and I didn't. I ran 49.11, and for a quarter miler, running 48 it's exceptional. I think it's an exceptional result. It's a special result, but it was okay. I was fine. I mean, I got the gold medal. I cherish my Olympic gold medal, but there's always this thing about not running 48 seconds. It's just an itch I cannot scratch, or it's an itch that will always need scratching. It's the strangest sensation.
I guess that's the athlete. There's always something that you can be looking for. You can be
always, and I just would have loved to have run faster that night. So I think there's a part of me that would have could have, would have, should have. But at the end of the day, an Olympic gold medal is the pinnacle in track and field. So yeah, good on me.
Then, of course, you famously celebrated with the two flags. There was so much positive reaction about that. I wondered if you had the other side of that as well, if there was much negative reaction too. Yeah,
no, that's an interesting question. I think I was just so drowning in celebration of feeling so personally satisfied and just so happy that, I'd gotten through everything in one piece. That I honestly didn't give much thought to, the naysayers or, those who you didn't quite understand or connect to why I flew both Australian flags. I've come to accept that you can't be understood by everybody. It's you can't, not everyone's going to embrace each other, in the true spirit of, solidarity. It's just, the world is a fair bit more complicated and complex. So, I mean, I'd been pretty clear, even like back in the 1994 Commonwealth Games, 6 years previous at the Victoria, British Columbia Commonwealth Games, where I became, I got world ranked in the top 3 for the 200 and 400 I back then flew both flags in my victory lap.
Yeah.
And I've always flown both flags in any major title I've ever won, Commonwealth Games, individual performances.
Yeah.
In 94 Commonwealth Games, 97 world title, 99 world title, and then Sydney. So it really shouldn't have been a surprise, especially to track and field fans or people who followed my story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How proud were you of the conversations that it started? How much of a difference that moment made in terms of Australia and reconciliation?
Yeah, I certainly. I've been told many things by my fellow, First Nations community members or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community members that, I certainly have left breadcrumbs for others to follow, and I was kind of like not really planning to create any what seems to be a lasting impact. I was just always about just personal expression and pride in who I was as an Australian Indigenous girl. It was more of me sharing with the world all of me.
Yeah.
And so, but certainly after all these years, it makes me really proud. You can go to some of Australia's most notable tourist sites or landmarks in the cities and in the rural parts of Australia, and communities are proud to fly the Aboriginal flag. They proudly embrace, the ancient culture of Indigenous folk here in Australia, and it's nice that I, helped to create a platform or, aid in the cause of being more visible or giving voice or however you want to coin it or term it. I certainly unwittingly created this impact. That's the only way I can really respond.
Yeah. Do you look back on that time now from this distance and wonder how you did it? Because there was so much focus on you as one individual. It's a lot to manage.
I think I put it down to just keeping life really simple and stripping away the things that aren't so necessary without being completely disrespectful of others, Yeah. Like I understood, that the media have a job to do, that administrators have a job to do. The reality is that people get excited about hosting an Olympic Games.
Yeah.
And the opportunity is just can be lifelong, and the benefits for the community and for the economy and, the list is long, and the legacy piece, of course. Yeah. It's rich. It's an incredible gift to, to host an Olympic Games. And so, being the seasoned Olympian that I was, when Sydney rolled around, I was very attuned to those specific conditions, but I'd learned and honed a way of protecting. Protection, is that the right word, or moving through it all, so that I always, was able to maintain my feeling of joy and freedom that I felt when I raced and when I ran.
Yeah.
And, those conversations I had with my training partners, with my coach, it was always about the running. And so, yeah, you kind of I was determined to live my life the way I wanted, exactly how I wanted to live it. So,
yeah.
And that was really clear, I feel.
Yeah.
And it showed.
Yeah.
Thank you to Cathy for our time, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Look out for more from the Athletics Weekly podcast in the coming weeks via your usual podcast provider, where you can also find our previous episodes. And don't forget, you can keep up to date with all the latest athletics news via athleticsweekly.com, where you can also find out how to become an AW subscriber. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.